Welcome back, everyone. So before we start on the stories, I wanted to explain a bit about the stories in this video. I actually covered a few of these a couple of years ago, so some of you may remember them, but the video has since been deleted off the channel, so I wanted to re-narrate them. The stories in this video are kind of interesting. Some of them will be from the perspective of the actual stalker or creeper, as well as from people who unintentionally became the creep. I hope you guys enjoy it and are still enjoying all of the daily videos. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing because I post scary stories every single day. All that being said, let's begin. This story is a little bit different. In this particular story, I was on the other end. I was the creeper. I really love seeing so many stories where someone gets creeped on, but I thought I'd break the mold a little and post my own story. Maybe seeing through the eyes of the creeper and gaining a little bit of understanding into the mindset of a person committing these acts would be a welcome perspective shift. I'll start with a little bit of background on me so you can understand the type of person I am. I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I was never abused, neglected, or any of the stereotypical serial killer stuff. In fact, it was quite the opposite. If anything, my family gave me too much and was overly protective. I think this is what actually led to my issues in the first place. I was never allowed to go to the other kids' houses unless my mother had met their parents first, which led me to being left out of a lot of things. I was also not really allowed to watch a lot of the movies that all of the other kids my age were always talking about. For example, the movie Jurassic Park was really huge with my classmates when I was around 10 years old, but I never got to watch it. I believe I was actually about 16 or 17 by the time I actually saw the movie for the very first time. This kind of thing led me to being further out of the loop. And couple that with the fact that my grandma would buy me pretty much anything I even hinted that I wanted, which led to a lot of jealousy from other kids. I was more or less the bullied loner all throughout school. I never really learned how to relate to other people, and I'm pretty socially awkward, and I have anxiety issues to this day anytime I have to deal with anyone I don't know very well. As far as looks go, I know people tend to expect creepers to be overweight balding guys with thick glasses and really bad skin. You know, the typical 40-year-old basement dweller. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I've always been told I'm a decently attractive guy. I'm at worst average looking. Even in high school when I was an outcast, I overheard a girl talking about me once and saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, he'd be pretty hot if he wasn't so weird." So you really can't judge a book by its cover. Relationships have always been a huge struggle for me for two main reasons. One, I struggle to even approach someone I don't know, let alone hold a conversation, figure out if they're interested and ask them out. Most of the girlfriends I had usually pursued me, so they initiated the relationship. The second reason is that being around other people is absolutely utterly draining for me. It takes an extreme amount of effort for me to try to appear normal around others. I'm constantly worried about whether I'm doing or saying the right things. I go through conversations in my head before I actually speak to make sure it won't be misunderstood somehow. I second guess just about everything and sit there analyzing every tiny detail of their reactions just to see if I'm coming off as I mean to. The effort is utterly exhausting, and most of the time I'd really just rather be alone. However, I am still a human being, and I still have a need for attention and affection. The problem is, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I don't know what to do with it when I actually get it, and it usually just ends in pain. Anyway, on to the actual story here, since I know you're not all reading this just to read my depressing life history. I was early in my 20s, just after college. The local rock radio station that I listened to got a female DJ who was on during the time that I was usually listening to the radio. She seemed really cool, played a lot of the stuff that I liked, was fun to listen to, and I would pretty much tune in every night. She would occasionally talk a little bit about her personal interests, and most of them I shared. She liked video games, comic books, rock music obviously, and other somewhat nerdy things. I was eventually convinced that we had so much in common that she was the perfect girl for me. I followed her on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and pretty much every social media page that she had. Even tracking down her personal Facebook, and not just the public one that she advertised on the radio. I talked to her through social media whenever I could think of something to say, which most of the time just ended up being song requests. But she was always really friendly and even gave me a shout out on the air one night. I know, I'm already sounding pretty creepy, but I swear my intentions were 100% innocent at this point. I really just liked this girl a lot and I wanted to get to know her, but had no idea how to go about it. I started going to every concert the radio station sponsored, which in our smaller town were not very big or very often. We don't have any kind of arena or anything, so they were all at bars with a few hundred people at most. We got some nationally known bands a few times, but nobody major. They were mostly up-and-coming bands or bands who are way past their prime. The biggest thing they ever had was in a field behind a bar with a couple thousand people in attendance. Anyway, she was always there, of course, since she worked for the station, and because the concerts were so small, I would always see her. I could never work up the guts to go and talk to her because at this point I had put her on this pedestal in my mind, and I just couldn't talk to her unless I was sure I would say the right things. I mean, I couldn't have her first impressions of me being anything less than perfect. So most of the time I just got drunk and talked to whoever was around instead. After a while of this, I ran into a guy that I worked with at one of the concerts. I was already pretty drunk at that point, so I ended up telling him that I really liked this girl, but I was too afraid to talk to her. His response to this was to drag my drunken self right up to her and strike up a conversation. When I'm drunk, I'm actually pretty outgoing, so surprisingly, things went well, and I left very excited about everything. I sent her a message on Facebook a couple of days later, and she actually remembered me, which was really encouraging, and I ended up asking her if she'd like to hang out sometime. She agreed, and I nearly broke my desk. I was so excited. Since she worked nights on the radio as well as a second job, I ended up meeting her for lunch at the mall on our break. Well, lunch didn't go so well. My sober self clearly isn't as charming as my drunken self, and things were rather quiet and really awkward. In absolute desperation, I started talking about all of the things that we had in common, and eventually I got so desperate that I told her that I thought I might be falling for her. In hindsight, probably not the best thing to say to a girl you just met, and she was understandably really creeped out. She politely excused herself to go back to work, and I pretty much just sat there wanting to smash my head on the table. I just knew that I had blown my chances with her. Instead of admitting defeat though, I just had to keep trying. I messaged her on Facebook about 1,000 times over the next couple of weeks, trying to apologize for coming on too strong and trying to get another shot. She responded a few times and was really polite, but a lot less friendly than before. Eventually she blocked me, and looking back, I can't really say that I blame her for that. At the time though, I was really distraught. Then my sadness turned to anger. At first, I was really angry at myself more than anything, but then I started to think things like, I was never anything but nice to this girl. Why can't she just get to know me? I decided that I needed to talk to her in person again, but she was clearly not going to meet me at this point. So I would hang around her store in the mall, but I always seemed to miss her somehow. After thinking about it, I suspect that they probably sent her to the back to hide or something whenever they saw me coming. But at the time, I just thought that she must work a different schedule every day or something. And finally, I decided to wait for her after work at the radio station. This was my worst idea yet. As I mentioned, she was on the air at nighttime, so it was after midnight when she came outside and got in her car to go home. I followed her. Even at the time, I realized I was being creepy, but I was just so desperate to be with this girl that I just didn't care. I mean, this sort of thing happens in the movies all the time, right? The girl eventually ends up with the guy and they have this crazy romantic story to tell, right? Well, real life is not like the movies. She apparently called the cops on the way back to her place because they pulled in right behind us and then dragged me out of the car. I was arrested and I ended up on probation with a restraining order. I never had any intentions on hurting this girl, but I understand that she had no way of knowing that at the time. Other than a handwritten apology letter which was read and delivered to her by a police officer, I've had no further contact with her since. She actually left the radio station and moved to another city shortly after. I've been through court-ordered therapy and some of my issues have gotten better. I actually have a girlfriend now and I'm in a pretty healthy relationship. Although I still suffer from anxiety and depression, I'm managing it pretty well and I live a pretty reasonably happy life now. I haven't creeped on anyone since. I'm a male, and this happened a few years ago back when I was 17. It was winter, so it was getting dark out fairly early, and there was an event that was happening at my girlfriend's school. Throughout the event, live music was being performed by students. My girlfriend was singing as a part of a small band, and so I was going to see her perform. The thing is, I live along an awkward bus route that doesn't link up with the village in which the school is located. Meaning I have a 20-minute bus ride and around a 15-minute walk across some fields to get to the school. So I set out with plenty of time for the bus ride and enough time for my short walk to get on the bus and sit on the back seat as I usually do when it's free. And just my luck, partway through the bus journey, there's traffic. There had been an accident some ways up the road which caused us to be delayed for quite a while. Meaning that when I got off the bus, I was going to have to either run or be late for the event. So the bus finally gets to its stop. Around 4 other people get off the bus before me. The first a girl roughly around my age, possibly a year or two younger, but hard to tell. She gets off the bus and jogs along down the road and out of sight. The other passengers, mostly elderly, take their time to get off the bus next. I thank the driver, hop off the bus, and then quickly pull my phone out to check the time and text my girlfriend to tell her that I was going to be delayed. So it's time to go. After all, I don't want to be late. I run down the road and then turn through the gate into the first field and continue running. As once again, I see the girl from the bus stop up ahead of me in the middle of the field. She must have got tired and started walking. I didn't really think too much of it and planned to just run past her. I continue until I saw her stumble and pause for a moment. She must have heard my footsteps. She turned her head and caught sight of me, then immediately snapping forward again to keep walking. I sensed that she felt nervous, so I stopped running and began to walk instead. Which may sound more suspicious than I intended it to be, but I mean, I wasn't about to charge headfirst towards a young nervous girl in the middle of the field in the dark. Now that would have got me into trouble. However, I didn't want to be late. I knew that my girlfriend would be one of the first performances, so she'd probably kill me if I missed it, but I couldn't run. So I found a mid-ground and walked quickly after a couple of minutes. I gained up on the girl and she noticed and she sped up too. At this point, I'm pretty much thinking, for God's sake, can't you just hang to the side and let me go past you? I sped up slightly and she did the same. I saw her clutching her phone, probably resting her finger on the dial button for emergency services. I suddenly realized that she may actually be heading to the same event that I was. I opened my mouth to speak, only to clamp it shut immediately. She was nervous and I'm socially awkward. Chances are I'd probably just make her think that she's being stalked or something. I knew better than to spit out creepy lines about knowing where she was headed to. After all, I wasn't even a student at this school. She couldn't have recognized me even if she tried. We then began a long and awkward game of possibly terrified girl walks quickly away from the impatient yet innocent and nice guy with no harmful intent. I really felt awful, but I mean, I couldn't slow down. I really needed to be at that event on time. Eventually, we got out of the fields and back onto a streetlit road. She followed the road around, presumably to stay within the streetlights, and I immediately darted into an alleyway shortcut towards the school, attempting to make up for the lost time. I got to the school just as the crowd filtered into the event hall. Once the event was over, we all went out into the car park, and there was the girl, just standing among a group of her friends, likely having warned them of the creeper in the field who had chased her down for 15 minutes. She then noticed me, and her face went blank and slightly pale. I held my girlfriend's hand and gave the girl a sheepish smile and a shrug. She then reciprocated with the kind of expression that says, You've gotta be kidding me. As she then realized that all I was really trying to do was get here quickly. I didn't dare start a conversation. I just left. So, to the girl that I probably scared within an inch of her life, I'm not some evil stalker creep. Never have been and hope to never be. I deeply apologize. I really do hope that I never have to feel awful about not stalking someone again. In all honesty, I would have likely just rushed to your aid had a real stalker came after you. I hope you enjoyed the event, and in the near future, stay safe while you're alone in fields during the dark. I'm a 28-year-old male living in the Deep South. I'm now a functional, medicated, and therapy-attending paranoid schizophrenic. However, I wasn't always this way, and this story comes from a time before I ever even knew what was wrong with me. It was about April 2007 when this happened. I had just come out of a really painful divorce, and she had taken away all of my friends in the process. I was obviously trying to reach out to anyone I could, but I had severe codependency issues that I didn't know how to address. Anyway, I found myself wandering the games section of my local Walmart, as I'm still a gamer at heart, and I had to see what was available. Things were going all right, and I seemed to be in control of myself. Then he appeared. This poor, unsuspecting soul started talking to me about World of Warcraft, which I happened to play. I perked up at this point, thinking that I could make a new friend that hadn't been taken away from me. We made casual jokes and talked about the new expansion that just came out, or was soon to come out. At this point, his mother came by and took him to another aisle. He was probably about 18 to 20, judging by his appearance. He didn't say goodbye, he just walked off. And just like that, our conversation was over. Well, in my mind, we had made a connection. We had bonded. In my sick, twisted state, I thought that he would appreciate it if we hung out for a while. So I followed him. I made a point to casually stroll down the aisles that he happened to visit and strike up conversations with him about different things. Jokes, games, I can't really remember. I could tell he was getting creeped out by the third time I had done this. He had started getting this deer-in-the-headlights look every time he saw me, and it was starting to become a horror story, though in my eyes, it was perfectly natural. At some point, however, his fight or flight must have kicked in, because when I appeared, as soon as I opened my mouth to try and speak, he then screamed, "Dude, leave me alone!" and then stormed off, dragging his mother as quickly as he possibly could. This was a wake-up call for me that I was being severely creepy, but also a stalker. I realized that this could very well be the behavior that caused my divorce in the first place. I checked myself into a mental institution soon after, and then got the help that I needed. I'm now significantly better, and my relationships with people have improved greatly. I now have really good friends and a loving fiance. Something to note is not all creepers mean to be creepy. Some of us just really need the proper psychiatric help. On behalf of all the unknowing and good-intentioned creepers out there, I humbly and sincerely apologize for our behavior. It doesn't make it forgivable, but I hope it does give some context as to what actually goes on in the mind of a creeper. Thank you for your time. Back when I was quite young, like maybe around 15 years old, I met a guy online. He lived overseas and he was quite cute and British, and he was really intelligent and he made me laugh. I fell for him pretty hard. At first, it seemed like he liked me back. We flirted a lot. Loads of winky faces and playful wording. We cheekily invited each other to be each other's virtual valentines when the holiday saw us both alone. He was perfect, and he was my first love. And I'm not gonna lie, I got pretty obsessive over him. After a while, he got a little distant, and instead of acting like a normal person, I totally freaked out. I asked his friends a lot of personal questions about him that he wouldn't answer himself, and when I didn't get the answers that I wanted, I got really mad. The more I clung to him, the more I could see him trying to pull away, and it broke my heart. I didn't even see myself as doing anything wrong. I just really wanted him to feel as strongly about me as I did for him. I constantly told him I loved him, and I got his phone number from a friend of his and texted him despite the long distance charges. I did this constantly. I found him on websites like DeviantArt and favorited everything he wrote. I added him on Facebook, and I even friended a bunch of his friends and family for information. I got insanely jealous if he'd flirt with other people, which I've come to understand is just his way of interacting. He's a playful dude, and it's really just his manner to tease. I used to anonymously message other people who got close to him, telling them that he was using them and he didn't really care about them, and that they were worthless and ugly and stupid. You have to understand, I know now just how awful all of this was. After a while, I realized that he was slowly losing interest in me, and I'm ashamed to admit that I made a fake account, so I slowly befriended him this way. I put on a new persona and started fresh with him, and I was so excited when he started to really like me. I invented an entire backstory for this new persona, like fake images, fake family, etc., just to make him like me. And he did. He really liked me. Like to the point to where he talked about coming to visit me overseas. I welcomed this idea enthusiastically, although my mind was racing with ways to avoid him finding out what I'd done. What really got to me though was when he would mention the real me to my persona. He mentioned how crazy I was and how he thought I was stalking him, and I would get this horrible black pit deep in my stomach. But I would just laugh and pretend to sympathize with him on it. I think that's what finally made me realize what I was doing. Calling myself a crazy woman and making fun of myself like that made me see his point of view on this whole thing, and seeing myself from his eyes made me feel sick. I'd never actually meant to go crazy like that. Soon after, I just decided to drop contact with him. It really hurt. It physically hurt me to stop talking to him. Every day I would think that maybe it wouldn't hurt to message him. Maybe I was better now. Every single night I was absolutely plagued with thoughts of just returning as my persona. After not talking to him for about 3 months, I saw that he was asking about my persona to a mutual friend. He was really worried about my fake persona, and I felt like a terrible human being for this whole thing. So I decided to message him as my persona, but I told him the truth. I told him everything I'd done, how stupid I was, how I really treasured talking to him, and how I was really sorry for everything. He was surprisingly really cool with it. He admitted that I was really crazy, but he liked that I was honest. He told me if I wanted to, we could start again for the 3rd time, and I took him up on it. We started our new friendship pretty warily at first, but now that I'd seen that god-awful side of myself, it sort of faded out. I did still treasure him, but I could see that he wasn't the perfect person I'd made him out to be. We started talking more often, and we're actually really close friends now, and eventually I moved on. I now have a wonderful fiance who I'm very much in love with. I've also learned the difference between love and idolization. Honestly, we now just laugh about it, but I'm still a little sickened whenever I think about the person I became. I never want to be like that ever again. I live alone in a not-so-great part of Philly. There's a lot of car thefts, robberies, and recently a man actually did some questionable things to his own daughter. Yeah, it's a lot. But there's these kids in my neighborhood that always cheer me up. They're about 8 to 10 years old tops, so they're not allowed out late, but I don't go out late either because I'm like 5'3" and 100 pounds. So realistically, I have to stay safe, and I'm only outside in the afternoon. These kids are really funny, and I usually see them as I walk down the street for my grocery shopping. They always yell something at me and ask to borrow various things that I don't even own. Once it was a pickaxe because they wanted to dig up the sidewalk the year that they all got metal detectors for Christmas. And it generally cracks me up, and it's super adorable. A couple of summers ago, they saw that I would read on my stoop during the summer days with a pitcher of lemonade, and they started coming by to ask for some. I never really thought anything of it because I'm not a creep and the parents are generally neglectful around here, so I didn't really think they were worried. So I was cool with bringing out some extra cups, and if the kids wanted some, I'd just pour them a cup, and they'd then run back to playing. Well, last summer, candy was on sale at the grocery store, like really big bags of Twizzlers and Airheads and stuff. So I bought a bunch of them and would give them out whenever they came by to say hi. Their parents usually always saw me give it to them, and I'm not stupid enough to give kids bare candy, so I was literally giving them like a big shareable bag of candy once a week, and they'd thank me profusely and then go enjoy it while playing in the yard. Again, the parents generally saw all of this happen as we're neighbors. Then one day I was confronted, and I don't know if they were just drunk at the time, but I was then accused of grooming their children. I was so shocked and felt so stupid because, duh. I'm handing out candy to kids that I don't really know, so I then apologized and just felt really terrible about the whole thing. I ended up calling the police to tell them that I wanted to prepare to be accused of something that I didn't do, and they actually arrested the parents of the largest family of kids. I haven't seen any kids outside during this past summer, and it really makes me so sad. I'm sure if the parents were arrested, then obviously they needed to be taken away. But I can't shake the feeling that me trying to do something stupid like give kids candy was anything less than creepy. And I honestly feel like I broke their family up. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place for this, as it's really more funny than scary. At least for me. But back when me and my fiance first started dating, we were about 17 years old. And being 17 with parents that wouldn't let us hang out in a closed room, we would find other places to be teenagers. So we had a pretty good spot. It was in a parking lot that was across the street from this church. We would park my car in a darkened corner of the parking lot. It didn't look too weird because there were other cars that would also be left here at night. And plus, no cops would ever drive by. I would always be at the edge of the parking lot, which had a very large chain link fence and apartments on the other side of it. We would go here pretty much every night around the same time every night and leave around the same time. One night the parking lot was surprisingly full, so we decided to instead park on the street outside of the parking lot and then just hang out there. After about 20 minutes or so, a large truck then pulls up and rolls down his window. He asks if we'd seen a dark car drive around here driven by a male that always parks at the church in the back. My car is a seafoam green color, so it didn't really click at the time, so I then told him, "No, sorry." Then he says, "Okay, well, keep an eye out if you see a sketchy car. He's been parking in front of my girlfriend's place and sitting in his car for about an hour, then leaving." I told him alright and good luck. After he left, I realized that me and my girlfriend were the only car that parked there at that time of night, and due to the unlit area of the parking lot, my car must have looked really dark. And the cause of the one male in the driver's seat was because my girlfriend was ducking down on my lap. I never saw him again, and we started to find other places to hang out just to avoid scaring her. So, girl with the apartment by the church, I'm really sorry that I was accidentally the creepy stalker out your window. Just to avoid the awkwardness, let's never meet. Before I start on the story, let me describe my physique. I'm a male, about 5'11" and 210 pounds. I'm pale as snow and with ungodly long hair, down to the small of my back or so. The story begins around last winter at the college I go to during the fall semester. Mondays were the busiest days for me. I would usually end up taking about 4 or 5 classes, so on those nights I would usually end up taking classes pretty late at night, usually lasting about 10:30 or so. Then I would drive home. On this particular Monday night, I had parked further out in the parking lot due to the fact that it was really packed in the morning. My truck and a few other trucks and cars would have been the only vehicles in the lot by this time of night. Anyway, I leave class and then head out into the lot, and I take out my keys. There was one student that was walking a good distance ahead of me. He was much taller than me and seemed like he could hold his own in a fight. However, he just kept looking behind himself as if he thought he was being followed by someone sinister. Suddenly, a really cold gust of wind blows through my coat, and I take up a light jog to my truck, which happens to be a couple of spaces away from this other student's. The student ahead of me suddenly stops short, then sprints to his car as fast as he can. I slow down on getting to my car, realizing that he must have seen me reach for my keys. Could he have been thinking the worst? I'm not sure. I still think about this encounter sometimes, and I feel really bad for the guy. This happened about 4 years ago. I still live in the same apartment. I was at SAHM at the time. My son was 3. He and I were the only ones home at the time. I'm also a very small person, 5'2" and 100 pounds at the time. I had received a notice from the office that a maintenance man was going to come by that day to change my AC filter. I waited all morning and put the kid down for his nap. I decided that I should take a nap too. I put my baby a sleeping sign on the front door. Apparently the maintenance man took that as permission to enter. Wrong house for that, buddy. See, when my son was about to be born, my dad had gifted me with my home security system, a double-barrel shotgun. I can unlock and load that baby really quick when I'm scared, and I've been shooting all my life. So when I heard someone rattling around in my living room, I loaded it up and came out of my room with it shouldered, safety off. The maintenance man was working on my AC and found himself staring down both barrels. He dropped his tool, put his hands up, and then started apologizing. I lowered the gun. That same maintenance man has never been back to my unit, and ever since, the others always knock, wait for me to open the door, and stand back and always ask twice before entering. I think it's safe to say my reputation precedes me. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I really creeped out my maintenance man. Sorry, but that's just how I was raised.